good to see you again.
Hello, lovely to see you too again, Daphina.
How was your day today?
It was good, London style, so always on the run.
Okay, well, you know that we're going to talk about vitamins and supplements, but we want all your expertise and your knowledge. Before we get into the topic, I just want to ask you, can you just tell us why you chose to get into nutrition and why you chose to stick with it as your own lifestyle?
To be fair, nutrition kind of fell into my lap, which is quite interesting because it was actually my third degree choice. It wasn't my first.
Okay.
Firstly, I wanted to do something, I always wanted to help people. So my vision was helping others. And my first ever degree was radiography. Okay. And I did a year of that, and I realized that I didn't want to see unwell people go into hospital. I couldn't hack it. I would go home and cry, and I just couldn't hack that kind of pressure of seeing people who were not well in hospital. So then I decided that I always liked chemistry. Mm-hmm. So I thought about doing pharmaceutical science because I've always dreamt to be a pharmacist, and I've always loved science as it is. Because then I picked my second choice, and whilst I was studying chemistry, I was just like, I couldn't read the book for hours and hours and hours without being on the go, because I'm a very active person. I've always been active since my childhood days. So then I went to one of my professors, and I basically said to her, and I told her my history of how I had health issues growing up, and I was a bit overweight, and then I had to obviously seek help for numerous health conditions, and the doctor basically said to me that if you don't lose weight, you might develop XYZ condition. So from a young age, I lost weight, and then I told her my story, and she basically turned around and said to me, why have you not thought about nutrition? Because you're passionate about nutrition and food. And from then onwards, she gave me a book, and I've kept that book ever since. And it's been 10 years now, so a decade. And I've always loved nutrition since then. So obviously then I went to do my bachelor's in nutrition, and I specialized in a master's in clinical nutrition because unfortunately my brother was diagnosed with an inflammatory bowel disorder, and that drove me to further my career in clinical nutrition and then start doing research in epigenetics and Crohn's, because Crohn's is close to my heart. So that's kind of like how nutrition fell into my lap. And it's been a decade as a nutritionist now, and to be fair, seeing me help individuals, and as opposed to people needing help, they come to you seeking help. So that's what I'm more passionate about, is helping others who want help rather than they need it from a medical professional, while like in a hospital setting. So that's why that's how kind of like my nutrition background is so far. And obviously now I own a nutritional supplement brand, which we'll discuss how that kind of fell into my lap later on, I believe. But yeah, that's kind of like my career within a decade.
It's quite interesting how you get sometimes guided by where you don't expect it, and you take a different route. So it's really, really quite an interesting story how you got into it. It's always like when you get into health, I think something happens, or you get a person ill in the family, or you hear such and such stories, and then it gets you interested. Or sometimes you just find out this information and you think, oh my god, wow, this is like so interesting, and then you go deeper, and then you fall in love more and more and more with nutrition. Because a lot of people think like you should just take vitamins and supplements, and it's enough. You'll get the right vitamins from just taking vitamins and supplements. Or sometimes it's the case where people think, oh, I'm eating normally, I think I have a varied diet and I've got enough vitamins and vitamins inside my body without testing or anything. Can you just tell us, can vitamins and minerals or supplements compensate for a poor diet?
No, that's an amazing question. It's something which I'm asked on a day-to-day basis, because as a nutritionist, my first point of call is to help individuals through their dietary intake. So in a short sense, should you supplement a poor diet? No. Dietary intake comes first. So obviously micronutrients, which is vitamins and minerals, they're essential from us, but not in a high amount. They're essential, hence the word micro. So in a small amount, then obviously our macronutrients are fats, carbohydrates, proteins. But we shouldn't use supplements to compensate them through our dietary intake. We should use them to supplement, because the word itself is supplement, to help our dietary intake. So as we know, currently our life is very kind of like fast-paced. Our westernized life is very fast-paced, and we're more prone to consuming a certain dietary intake, which obviously might not necessarily always give us the adequate amount of vitamins and minerals we need, or the dosage that we need. But obviously I would always say to start editing your dietary intake in order to ensure that you consume at least an adequate amount prior to supplementation. Supplementation helps. It shouldn't replace food. And that's what obviously as nutritionists I always recommend, because you should always consume these vitamins and minerals through your dietary intake. For example, like in order to have good health, you should obviously consume minerals like magnesium, calcium, your water-soluble vitamins like B vitamins, vitamin C through your dietary intake. But then there are certain individuals who will require supplementation, because obviously certain individuals, unfortunately, they will have health conditions where they can't consume them due to obviously different sorts of issues that they may have. So then they would require supplementation, but that's a smaller group of individuals. The average individual should not supplement as opposed to eating a varied diet. It should work alongside, so it works hand in hand. If you ever want to supplement, you need to have a good adequate dietary intake. You can't, for example, say I'm taking a multivitamin so I don't need to eat fruits and vegetables, because we need fruits and vegetables. They're essential to our dietary intake. So it kind of works hand in hand in that sense. So to basically answer it, we shouldn't supplement to compensate a poor diet. We should ensure that we have a varied diet, and then if we need supplementation, then we will add supplementation to them. And obviously different disorders will require supplementation, but that's something which obviously individuals would go to their general practitioner, to their consultant, and obviously a dietitian or a nutritionist, and they would work hand in hand with supplementation rather than just picking something off the shelf.
That's a really good elaboration, actually, because when I was pregnant with my third child, and I didn't realize that I was so low on vitamin D3, and I just assumed that I had enough, and when I went to get it tested, and it was so low, and I was also taking these vitamins already, that was not enough. So I was thinking, what is wrong with that? And you don't really realize with things like that you're deficient in something unless you go and do the routine blood test. So I think it's so important to get informed on your supplementation, not just take it because you think you should take it, but it's so important to get like genuine expertise advice, and also get tested. So because sometimes you're not going to get all of the vitamins, even if you eat healthy. You just think you might need to see if you have any symptoms, or because like with magnesium, sometimes when you're pregnant you can get some symptoms that you're lacking magnesium, which like you get cramps in the legs and things like that. So should you just look out for symptoms, and then you might know that whether you need vitamin supplementation.
I mean, there's not one size fits all in nutritional or anything supplement wise. I think one of the things that, for example, in the UK we have, obviously vitamin D, as you touched upon, it's one of the vitamins which is essential for every single individual from the months of September up until March. Just because of the UV rays, we don't have enough sunshine, unfortunately, in order to ensure that we have an adequate amount. And especially if you've not really been out during the summer months and absorbed enough vitamin D through, obviously it's called the sunshine vitamin, through sunshine, then you would definitely need supplementation. But also pregnant women require folic acid. So these two categories, they're essential. And also kids, for example, from the age of 6 months up until 5 years old, within the UK, they're recommended to obviously have different micronutrients like vitamin A, C and D on a daily basis, just to ensure that they have an adequate amount leading up until obviously childhood and so on. So these are kind of like the categories which are essential. In terms of would I, for example, ask a client or someone to supplement as opposed to taking a blood test to ensure that they have an adequate amount, I would always, if they have symptoms, I would always refer them to a general practitioner to get tested prior to supplementation, because there are times when, for example, there might be red flag symptoms and they need a general practitioner as opposed to picking up a supplementation and taking it and hoping that their symptoms will go away. You never know what that symptom might actually be. So long term, I would definitely recommend a blood test, obviously via a general practitioner or a consultant prior to supplementation, because you need to know whether you're deficient or not. But sometimes you take a supplement, and if you're not necessarily deficient in certain supplements, it can actually prove to be more harmful than helpful. So I would definitely recommend, but obviously in the UK and worldwide in Europe, there are regulated doses, so you should never overtake a vitamin or mineral, because they'll be in a limit dose.
It's better to test and don't guess, so literally you need to be sure what supplements you need or you should take. I think it's definitely people should start researching into vitamins and supplementation, because it's something that could help them and may help with any symptoms they have. But obviously they need to check with their doctor first. How are vitamins and supplements are regulated? Maybe in the UK there is quite a lot of regulation, and they're better regulated, because sometimes in Kosovo you don't know whether you're getting a really good quality vitamin supplementation, because sometimes you might just take the supplements and they're not doing you any good. So can you just tell us how people can know that they're buying a good brand, or how would they know that it's been a regulated vitamin or a supplement, especially a brand that they don't know of?
No, definitely, because obviously the UK is slightly different, and every kind of country or continent will have their own kind of like rules and regulations. In the UK, it's a food supplement, so it falls under the Food Safety Act. So there are regulations prior to manufacturing a supplement. It depends on obviously the brand and where it's manufactured, because a lot of brands might be made in the UK, but they might be manufactured somewhere else. They might just be obviously packaged in the UK, but we have regulations here. They're not super strict to an extent like a pharmaceutical product, for example. A pharmaceutical product would be more strict in terms of regulations. Under the Food Safety Act, they're not as strict. But again, there is a limit to, for example, the dose that they can use for a micronutrient, how much is allowed in there. And they have to adhere to this prior to obviously manufacturing them. So whatever is kind of like manufactured in the UK has to adhere to those dosage, which ensures that firstly, there's no chance in you taking a more than you should, which can obviously lead to more harmful than helpful effects, but also that it's manufactured in the way which is beneficial for the consumer. And there are obviously labelling guidelines in the UK, which when you pick up a supplement, you can't obviously make certain claims because it needs to be claim compliant as according to our act in the UK. But this is obviously primarily in the UK, and there's different regulations everywhere in the world. So I think it's a bit difficult because there's not tight regulations like the pharmaceutical industry, especially, for example, in Kosovo, there's so many other brands where you don't necessarily know where they originate from, or I know a lot of them are US based, American based and so on, which have certain different regulations. But then if they're not US and UK or Europe based, you don't really know. It depends on their country. But I would always turn a bottle around and ensure that to have a look to see whether it's regulated, because it usually states. And then just to read about the brand, read about the history, who manufactured it, where it's manufactured, and just kind of like, if you connect with a brand, you read a lot about it. They have obviously reviews and everything like that, and consumers have used it, then it's more likely to be a nice regulated brand.
Is there any particular ingredient that they should look out for, or like you mentioned, like a particular label that can distinguish a brand, a good brand from another brand, especially people living in Kosovo, places where there is less regulation? How can people choose these vitamins brands?
I think a lot of brands will need to have GMP, which is good manufacturing guidelines. That's a regulation which primarily a lot of brands have worldwide. It just ensures that the law of supplements is strict and how they manufacture and adheres to these good manufacturing standards. So it ensures that when your product is manufactured, firstly, the cleanliness is there. There's a lot of different guidelines. The safety is there, and how it's manufactured is in a safe, obviously, protocol. But also a lot of brands will invest in third-party testing. If they've got a third-party test, obviously, logo, it ensures that they've actually paid out of their own pocket to have them tested for any sort of ingredients which shouldn't be in there. So it ensures that obviously a brand has put money behind them in order to ensure that this product is safe for you to consume, and that the product doesn't contain any form of added ingredients, which is obviously not beneficial to humans. So in that sense, I think a lot of brands. But I think it's hard to distinguish between brands. But if I GMP, and I usually look to whether it's been tested by a third-party lab. A lot of American brands, European brands, and UK brands will do this. And I know in Kosovo a lot of the brands are UK or American, because I've had a look at the different pharmacies there. So I would always say to ensure that it's GMP, and it's if they've obviously given for third-party tests, which is quite beneficial, because it means that they've
put a lot of thought and effort, and obviously they've ensured that the product is what it says it is, because they test for potency, purity, everything like that, which is a very expensive thing to do, by the way, because we do it within our brand, but it ensures that what you give your consumer is what you say it is.
Everybody should look out for this GMP in the supplements, right? And then they know it's a good supplement, which is clean, which is quality, and the product has been really researched for them, like the ingredients and stuff. So that's like a safety little flag, right?
Third party testing is that GMP means that it's been manufactured in a good standard of quality. So where it's manufactured, it's adhered to the safety, cleanliness that it's meant to. But if you look for a third-party test, so a lot of brands, if you flip them over, it'll say third-party tested, which means it's been tested by a group of scientists.
Oh, okay. How can they know that the ingredients are quality? Like the vitamins inside, how would they know that it's a quality vitamin? The right amount of vitamin is used. Is there a way of knowing that?
Third-party test helps for purity and potency, because it means those are the dosage which is in the vitamin and the mineral supplement. But I also think that with labeling guidelines, if a supplement contains, say, 10 milligrams of vitamin C, you're meant to state 10 milligrams. You can't state more or less. So you're meant to adhere to the amount. Because when they're manufactured, you obviously manufacture a certain amount, and you've got a certain amount, and that's what you're meant to put on the label. And all of that it's usually looked upon when you put it into pharmacies or into accounts, into health food stores or online. So I think when you research the label, but also consumer reviews help. Like, I leave reviews when I'm extremely happy with a product or with a brand, and I assume vice versa, you probably do that. So works for you, leave an amazing review. And I think reviews really help. Obviously, there are a lot of platforms where people can leave their reviews, but in terms of ingredients, to understand, unless you really specialize in that field, ingredients-wise, it's quite difficult to fully understand all the ingredients. Because whilst it may, for example, it'll say vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, if you then look at the type of vitamin which is in there, unless you fully understand it, you won't necessarily know the difference. But all the supplements will always use a form which is easily, obviously, absorbed by individuals, or it'll be converted into a form which you will absorb. So I think brands usually adhere to that, but again, in Kosovo it's slightly different, because the brands which I saw, they're American and UK, but it might be slightly different because it's a different market, and obviously the guidelines will not be as strict. But in the UK, brands do have to adhere to this. They can't just write down it contains a certain amount when it doesn't. But I would say third-party testing helps, because it means that it's been tested for that potency. So you know if it's 10 milligrams, which is a low dose of vitamin C, but it's 10 milligrams.
Yeah. So in order to remain healthy or in good health, is it better to take a multivitamin, or is it better to take the vitamins individually? Sometimes, because I take a multivitamin, and when I don't take it that day, I feel like less energetic. I don't know, I've noticed that. And if I don't take my magnesium, I get cramps in my calves at the back of my legs. So what is your take on it?
No, that's a great question, because I think again it's very right. As mentioned, vitamin D, for example, is essential to take during the period of obviously late September to late March. That you should, if you can, take it as it is, because obviously within the recommended dose, I would always recommend to take it as it is. But then it depends on everyone's dietary needs, health needs, and so on. I would always recommend, if you take one nutrient, if you could take a multivitamin, it just ensures that obviously you have all the other nutrients, just to add it on there, because multivitamins will not always have a super high dose, because obviously it will contain a plethora of different vitamins and minerals within one capsule, tablet or powder. So I would always say to try and take them together. But it's also for example, if an individual is going to take a B vitamin, certain studies recommend to take them as a complex as opposed to individually, unless, for example, you follow dietary intake. A lot of people obviously turn into plant-based for different reasons, and they might be more prone to potentially being vitamin B12 deficient long term, so they would take a vitamin B12 supplement. Then obviously that would be slightly different. But I think if you could take obviously a multi, that would be beneficial because you would take all of them as opposed to one nutrient. But when it comes to minerals like magnesium, calcium, potassium, if you're deficient in anything like that and you've been recommended to take a supplement in these minerals, then they would always recommend you take them individually, because you cannot get a high dose of these minerals in one capsule. You would need to take at least 6 to 7 capsules, for example. If you have a look at the supplements that are out there, if you get a magnesium tablet or capsule, it would usually recommend up to 6. Whereas if it's a powder, it's usually like a teaspoon. Because you can absorb it easier in a powder format. So with minerals, if you've been recommended to take them, it's always good to take them individually. But in terms of vitamins, it would be best to take it as a multi, because it just ensures that you don't take all different capsules. Because I've had a lot of clients where, for example, they've picked up different supplements because they've gone into like Whole Foods and they've just picked them up, and then they usually come to me with like 10 different capsules. And I'm not being funny, but I would probably not be bothered to take 10 different capsules, because it's hard to remember to take 10 different capsules, right?
That's true.
Tell them, and I usually have a consultation and we discuss obviously their health needs, and we try and cut it down to as little capsules, tablets, because it's just easy for them to remember, because we tend to forget, and time is obviously important to us. So it depends on the individual, but if I would always try and get it down to less capsules as opposed to taking more, because sometimes a lot of people believe that the more the merrier. Sometimes with supplements, it's not, to be honest, because you might not need as many capsules or tablets or powders, and you can cut it down, and it works out easier for you on a daily basis.
That's a really good point, Egzona. Imagine me, I've got my kids supplements to give, and I've got myself supplements to give. So like, oh my God, sometimes, yeah, I do forget one or two, but yeah, especially when you have things like collagen to add, and like your super greens, like, you know, moringa and spirulina and all these other things to drink throughout the day. It's so difficult to remember everything. But yeah, I think multivitamin is quite good, especially for women, because we are so overused, like for our body in general, and like at a daily basis we have so much activity going on. So I think a multivitamin for me works really well. Does price matter when buying vitamin supplements? Does it affect the quality of the brand if it's a lower cost one, or is a higher priced one better quality? How can people decide when they're buying vitamins in terms of pricing?
When anything bigger wise involved, as human beings, we tend to obviously think like in terms of money. We assume that if it's higher price, it's always better quality. It's just something which is natural, I think, as individuals.
Yeah.
I think that it's a better quality, because I remember growing up, whenever I would want to buy like a pair of trainers or something, when it was high price, I would always be like, Dad, this is better, and he would be like, why? And I was like, because it costs more. And it's just that mentality is always with me. But in terms of supplements, this might not necessarily be the case, honestly speaking, because you might have a very good quality and it might not be highly priced at all. But because there's another one which might be a similar quality and it's double the price, we automatically think that's the best product to pick, which is a bit confusing to the consumer, because it's down to the brand. When I first launched my brand, I ensured that based on different factors, it was fairly priced, because it needs to be fairly priced within similar kind of brands or similar vitamins and mineral supplement out there. How you would tell the difference is quite different, because it's difficult, because unless you really research or anything like that. But as a nutritionist, if someone came to me and had a vitamin D supplement, we've got ones in the UK where they're £1, or they showed me one which was 15, I would always say £1. At the end of the day, you will still absorb your vitamin D through that supplementation, as opposed to you not being able to maybe financially afford the £15 one. So there's pros and cons. Obviously, it depends on the individual. Then you've got individuals who might look for a product which doesn't have additive binders, fillers, caking agents because of their beliefs. Then obviously you would have to have a look at different brands. But it's quite difficult to pinpoint, because it's down to the brand to put a price on their product. And unless you read the ingredients, read the brand story and everything like that, you really don't know what you're buying. But in a short form, if it's higher price, is it better quality? Not always. I would always say read the ingredients, read the product. If